Hello everyone, welcome back, and today I'm going to explain to you user authentication in as simple way as possible. Let's get started. Alright, so user authentication is something that really messes with people's minds because it's a concept that is not that hard to understand, but it's something new that people discover, and that's what I'm going to cover today. So we're going to start with the sign up process, which is actually very straightforward. There is nothing not to understand in it. So first let's cover sign up, and then we'll jump to sign in, which is something that people find problematic. So starting with sign up, we have a user, of course. Now this user is going to have a sign up form with which the user is going to send a request to our API, a post request with their email and password. Now this API is our backend. This is where all of the magic is going to happen. So we are going to focus on the API part now. So when the user sends a post request to the sign up endpoint, the first thing that happens is that we take the password of the user, which is this, and we hash the password, right? Because we don't want to store the plain text password in the database. So whatever database you're using, be it SQL or no SQL, that doesn't matter. What matters is you need to hash the password so that you don't store the original password. Now hashing in general means it's a one-way process, right? When you hash some text, you cannot get it back. It cannot be reversed. So you can only compare it, you can only verify it by hashing it again with the same algorithm, with the same properties, but you cannot reverse the hash, right? So when you hash a password like password 1234 is going to become this. So a random string. Now this is what you store in your database, right? So you store in the database this password and this email. Now there are many algorithms for hashing. The most popular ones are bcrypt, scrypt, and the newer one is argon2. Now the most popular one is bcrypt, so I'm going to focus on that. Right over here, as you can see, we have a bcrypt generator. It's just an online bcrypt generator. What we can do is we can say password 1234. Now this password is of course not safe, but it really doesn't matter. So if I was to make this 10 rounds, which is good for testing, it doesn't matter, right? The more rounds you have, the more CPU it's going to use, the more resources it's going to use. So maybe keep 12 in your app, but I'm going to use 10 because I used 10 in the demo also, right? So I'm going to generate a hash, and as you can see, this is our hash. Now this is what we are going to store in the database, and if you try to reverse this using any tool, you cannot, because this is made that way. And if I generate another hash, you'll see the hash won't be the same. If I click again, as you can see, the hash is different. So that's the fun of hashing. It doesn't matter how many times you hash, the result is going to be completely different. Now if I copy this hash and I paste it over here, I cannot reverse it, but I can compare it or match it with the original text. So if I say password 123, okay, not 1234, if I click on verify hash, as you can see, it does not match. If I make this 1234, it matches the text. So it can only match with the text. So if there is a hacker, they have to try several different passwords to match with the hash, but they cannot really reverse this hash. All right, that's it with the sign up process. There's nothing groundbreaking in it. You just hash the password and you store it in the database. That's it. All right, now that we are done with the sign up process, let's jump to the sign in process, which again, for the most part, it's very simple to understand, just that there is an end part that people find very confusing. So let's first of all quickly go through the entire sign in process, which is very easy. So we start with the same thing where the user sends a request to the API with the email and password. This time I have this email and password as sort of a demo. So let's say the user sent john@example.com with password 1234. Okay, now this gets sent to the API endpoint of sign in. Last time it was sign up, but this time it's sign in. Okay, now this gets sent to the API, and now the first thing that we do is we check if the user exists in the database. So we have the email, right? So we check with the email if the user exists or not. If the user does not exist, right, if for example, the database returns nothing, then we just return back as invalid credentials, because we don't want to tell the user that this email is wrong or the password is wrong. We just have to tell the user that, hey, you did not enter the right credentials. That's a safe way of saying things. All right. But if we do find the user in the database, so we continue with the next step. The next step is that we have verified that there is a user with this email. Now we have to verify that the user has the same password that they gave us, right? So it's the same password 1234. So now once we have verified the email, now we verify the password, but our password is stored like this in the database. So how can we verify it with this plain text? Similar to this UI right over here, whatever algorithm you use, whatever library you use, in this case bcrypt, they give you a function to verify or compare the hash. So we can use that function to simply compare the password with the hash string. So it's going to take this hash, it's going to take this password, and then it's going to compare them. And then if the answer is no, meaning if the comparison failed, like if I make this just password and if I click on verify hash, as you can see, it does not match. So if the password does not match with the hash, then we just return back invalid credentials again. Okay, same thing. But if the password does match, now that means that we have the right user. Now we want to log the user in. So up until now, this was very straightforward. We just check if the email is right, then we check if the password is right. And once we have verified that this is the right user, what do we do now? Now let's address the elephant in the room, that how do we persist that this user is signed in, so that the user does not have to enter their email and password every single time they want to perform an operation, right? So we don't have to do this every single time. So now we have verified that the email is right and we have verified that the password is right. Now comes the part where we authenticate the user. Now comes the part where we sign in the user. But how do we do that? Now there are many ways. The popular way nowadays is using something called JWT, or JSON Web Token. Now JWTs is a topic in its own, but if I was to explain in simple terms, it's a token, which means a string, an encrypted or encoded, appropriate word would be encoded string that encodes some JSON, right? So JSON Web Token. So if you go to jwt.io, you will have this playground that you can use. So this is how a JWT looks like for JSON like this, right? So this is some JSON that is encoded as this string, and there are two key things. First is that you need a JSON. Second is you need a secret string, right? So this is used to encode the JSON, and this is also used to verify that this JWT was encoded by this string. Now this may sound confusing, but let's go step by step. Right now we have to generate a JWT. Now you might be like, what is the purpose of JWTs? Like, what is the user going to do with this string? So this string or this token, in simple words, it's like a stamp or a badge. When you go to some place and they put a stamp on you, when you verify your identity and they put a stamp on you, so that next time you go back, you don't have to verify your identity again. They can just see the stamp and they can let you in. So similarly, this is a stamp that the user has to carry. So they don't have to enter their email and password again. So let's go over here and go to the JWT encoder, and I want you to follow along if you can. So we have this payload, right? This header does not really matter right now. Okay, what matters is this payload, the data. This is what we are going to encode into the JWT. So let's make this our user. Let's say our user who has an email. So let's give it an email of john@example.com, right? So this is what the user entered. So now this JSON becomes this string. Okay, and this is the secret that is used to generate this JSON. So let's give this secret, let's just make this some random string. Okay, now this secret needs to be a secret, right? It does not, you cannot expose it to the client side, and you have to keep it on the server side as an environment variable so that this does not get exposed, because this is the key to verify the token as well. So we have this email. Let's also add one more property over here, the ID. Okay, so let's say the ID is 1. Now this is basically our payload that is encoded in here. Now we have encoded the JWT. We'll go back to the decoder later. Let's come back here. And so first thing we need to create, generate, or encode a JWT is the payload, right? So we have this payload, and then we take this payload and we give a secret string and we combine them, and then we generate a JWT. It's also known as signing a JWT, right? So once a JWT or a token is generated, it looks like this. We give it back to the user as a token. So hey, take this token, keep it with yourself, and every time you come back, you show this token. So this is it with the sign in. This token is now the verification. You don't need email and password, but this token is what you need. Now let's see how you can verify the user the next time they send this. So the next time they send a token along, how do you verify it? All right, so now let's say the user goes to its profile page, right? So now the user requests his own profile. Now how do you first of all verify that this is the right user? First, the user sends a get request to our profile page with some headers. Okay, so when you are sending a request to an API, you generally send headers, which is automatically sent. You don't look at it, but headers, in simple words, are the metadata of your request. Okay, it's the details that the API will look at when you send it. So the common header, one common header is the content type. You might have seen this header, content type application/JSON, right? So this is the header name and this is the header value. So as this application JSON, there are many values to this header. The common one is this application JSON, but if you're sending something else, maybe you are sending some form data, maybe you're sending some media, some documents, then you will change this and you will modify this to something else, right? And we have, similar to this header, we have this authorization header, and the format that is followed usually for this header is, first you have this word bearer, and then you add a space, and then you have the token. Now this token should match with this token, right? So whatever you send in that token part should be this. So the stamp that we gave the user. So the user has to figure out, or sorry, the client side has to figure out where to store this. The client side stores it in the local storage or cookies. That's up to the client side. We are only talking about the server side over here, right? So whenever the user sends a request to the API for their profile, the user sends along their token, which is their badge. They show their badge. Hey, look at this badge. This is me. So this gets sent to the API profile endpoint, which then verifies the JWT or verifies the token. How? We take the token, right? So we take the bearer out of the string and we just take the token, and we add the secret string. Now this secret string should be the same as this, and that will tell us that if the JWT is verified or not. Coming back to this page, now we are going to the decoder part. As you can see this, so the user sends this token. Now we have to verify that this token is right. So we need two things. First, we need the token, and second, we need this secret. This secret needs to be the same secret that was used to generate. Okay, so when these two come together, we get signature verified. Now if anything is modified, let's say I remove this W, as you can see, becomes invalid. Even though the decoded payload stays the same, okay, anyone can decode a JWT. Decoding a JWT is not a problem. You don't have to store sensitive information in here. This right over here is not sensitive. I removed one letter from this JWT and it instantly becomes invalid. So when you tamper with the token, it becomes invalid. Okay, I'll put this back. It's verified now. But again, if I also modify the secret, as you can see, it's invalid. So the secret also needs to be the same that was before. So that is how strict it becomes. So again, when you generate a JWT, you need the payload and the secret. And when you decode the JWT, you need the token and the secret, the same secret. And this is simply an extra thing that we can use. We can use the ID to see which user it is, right? Because we have verified that it's the authenticated user, but who is this user, right? So that's why we have this payload. So we verify the JWT, and if the verification fails, we go ahead and say you are not authorized. So if the JWT is tampered with, it's invalid, or if the secret is different, it's invalid. In both cases, we say you are not authorized. Now, there is one more thing called expiry, which I'll get into later on, but for now, this is it. Then if the verification passes, then we get back the payload. We can get the payload even if the verification fails, but that's not we are looking at right now. So we get back the payload, we have the ID, we have the email, which is fine. We can select the user where the ID is this ID, and we return back the user profile. That's it. So that is, in simple words, how authentication works. If you want this graph, I will leave a link in the description below where you can access it, and you can maybe share it with your friends or whatever. But this is generally it for the user authentication. Now I'm going to show you a quick little demo of an API, and we'll also go through the code. Okay, so this is an API in Node.js that I made. If you're not familiar with the Node.js, it's fine. The code is there to just make you understand how things work. It does not really matter what framework you're using. So I'm just going to start the server. It starts at 5,000. Now I have Postman over here. The first thing we are going to do is sign up a user. So let's go to body, right? We have this email and this password. I hope you can see it. And so I've already made this user. So let's make a new user. I'm just going to say Jake, and let's make the password to be Jake password. Okay, I'm going to hit send, and as you can see, it says the user signed up successfully. Now what happens behind the scenes is, if we go to this page over here, we have the auth sign up endpoint, where first of all we hash the password, okay, using this function. And if I go to this function, as you can see, it says bcrypt.hash password, whatever password we taken. And now salt may be different from rounds, maybe they are different, maybe they're the same, I don't know. And the library we use is bcrypt.js. This is, but because this is more popular among tutorials, I used the bcrypt.js library. So we hash the password using this function, and over here, once we get the hashed password, we create the user. How do we create the user? We insert into users. This is basic SQL, email password, and we give the email and password. As simple as that. Now, if you don't know TypeScript, just ignore this part and the types part, right? If you are not into TypeScript, that's fine. So we create the user, and then we return back the user signed up successfully. Now this gets created in this db.sqlite3. So let's go into the users table. As you can see, we have the ID of 2, jake at example.com, and this is the password. And as you can see, the password is hashed, so it's really not readable right over here, and we cannot even decode it. So that's the sign up process. Now how does the sign in process look like? If I go to the sign in endpoint, we need to go to the body, and let's change this to jake at example.com, and let's just say the password is jake password. And actually, you know what, let's just say the password is different. I'm just going to make the password different. Hit send. As you can see, we get invalid credentials. Let me make the password right, but I'm going to modify the email. As you can see, we get the invalid credentials again. Right now, let's make everything correct, and as you can see, user signed in successfully, and we get the token. Now what happens behind the scenes of this endpoint? Let's go over here, and on the sign in endpoint, what we do is first we extract the email and password, and then we get the user by email. Okay, we select star from users, where email is this email. Okay, so we get the user. If there is no user, then we return a status of 401 with invalid credentials. Then we check if the password is valid, right? So meaning we have the user, right? This is if not user. So now we have the user, we check if the password is valid with the verify password function. So we go in here, and it uses the compare method from bcrypt. Again, it takes the password, takes the hash, and it compares them, and it returns to us true or false. So this is a boolean, either true or false. This password is what the user gave us, and this password comes from this user. Okay, so this is our database user, and this is what the user gave us. So now this is the hash, and this is the plain text password. So now if this variable is password valid is false, then we return again invalid credentials, the same as this. And once these both conditions are false, we come back here, we generate the token. Okay, now how do we generate the token? We use this library called JSON web token. So this is the official library to generate JWTs. Okay, and of course you need a secret. Okay, now this is some random secret, but you should use a .env file where you should keep that secret hidden. Okay, so we have this some random secret. We use the sign method from JWT, and we give it this. Now this may be confusing to some people, but I'll just expand it so that it is more easy to understand. Okay, so what we do here is we generate a JWT with the ID and email as our payload. Okay, but in JavaScript we don't need them twice if the key and value are same. So I just make this ID and email like this. Okay, so we generate a JWT with this payload, and I give the sign method the secret as well, and then we also have this expires in. So in 15 seconds this JWT will expire. So if I was to use this, 15 seconds have already been passed, so this JWT is expired and her user is already logged out. But I'll show you by generating a new one. So this is simply it. Expires in is optional. If you remove this, there is no expiry date for the JWT. The reason I put 15 seconds in here is to show a demo of how expiry works. In real world applications, you set it to maybe 30 days or 15 days or 7 days as you wish, but not 15 seconds, because you don't want the user to log out after 15 seconds of logging in. So we generate the token, we give it back to the user. Okay, let's try to use this token. But how do we use it? Let's go to this endpoint of me, which is similar to the profile one I showed. And this time, instead of going body, because we are using a GET request, we need to go to the headers. And even if it's a post request, you do the same thing, right? You go to the headers and you add a header called authorization, and you put it as bearer, and then add a space and this token. Okay, so if I click on send, as you can see, it gives us this error that, hey, token expired errors. The token is expired. So let's go ahead and generate a new one quickly. Let's copy this and let's paste it before 15 seconds pass. Hit send. As you can see, we get back our user successfully. And how does this work? So if I go to API me, we have this little thing called middleware. Now middleware is simple. It just sits between your request and your handler. Okay, so if I go to this middleware, which sits over here, this is just a function with which what we can do is we can get the token from headers, authorization, we split it with space, and we get the token, right? So if there is no token, then we just return unauthorized, and then we decode the token using this verify token function. So we go back to here. As you can see, we use the verify method just like we use the signed, and it takes the token and the secret. Okay, and it gives us back this decoded object of ID and email. Decoded, then we return the same thing, unauthorized. And then what we do is we set the request.user to the decoded object, right? So this request.user is basically our user that we can use to verify, okay, what user it is, because it has the ID and email. Okay, and then we call the next function because we have to move on from the middleware to the next handler over here. So here we just return the request.user. So this thing that you see right over here is the decoded JWT. Okay, because we also have issued at, IAT means issued at, and exp means expiry, so when it will expire. Now because 15 seconds have passed, I send again. I see we get an error. Now this is something that you have to handle, but if I go back over here and I modify something in the JWT, and if I hit send, as you can see, we have the JWT invalid signature, right? So we have to handle this as well. But yeah, that's pretty much it of how authentication works. This code is also very minimal, very straightforward, and the handler functions are not even that long. Any endpoint that you want to protect with the user, you add a middleware to it. Okay, and authentication, when you expand it, it can be more and more complicated, it can become more advanced, but this is the most basic level authentication that we have. You sign up the user, you sign in the user with tokens, that's it, and then you verify the token. So I hope this video helped you out. It may be a little bit long, but I've tried to make it as short as possible, covering everything in terms of basics. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you want more of these videos. Let me know if you are confused about anything in the comments below, and I'll try my best to solve those confusions. Hit like on the video, subscribe to the channel, and finally, thanks for watching.